Our guest on Perspectives today is Barbara Hamilton. She's an historian, researcher, and columnist for the Jefferson Gazette and the Conneaut Courier. And how are you doing today, Barbara?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
So, what got you interested in history in the first place?
I was never interested in history, Bob, until I met my husband in college. I'm from the South and he's from the North, but he had a particular interest in Southern history, especially the battlefields. So all of our vacations were on battlefields up and down the United States as we would travel from Florida to Ohio. And I fell in love with it. But he fell in love with the dates. I fell in love with the people that were involved in those battles. And so I began the study of those people at that time, and that's what I do today, the people behind the stories.
Yeah, you're right there, because when you read your articles, you talk about the people when they were born, who their kids were, how long they lived. Where do you go to do your research?
Originally, I used the basic Ashtabula County books, which would be the 1877 Ashtabula County book, and then again it was done by the Ashtabula County Genealogical Society, their book of 1985, I think it was printed, and Mona Large's two books. These are basic historical books on our county. So I began with those, but I've noticed a lack of interest in those old stories and a lack of information because things weren't printed then, they weren't interviewed, there weren't any other sources to go to. Occasionally I would, but I probably wrote about those for the first 10 years, but then I started hearing from readers, and of course the internet exploded. I've been writing for about 21 years, and you can find out all this information that adds so much to the story.
I was going to ask you about how the internet impacted your research.
Oh, unbelievable. And in all the resources listed at the bottom of these stories, it'll mention books. And I order those books off of eBay and study those books. And then that will lead into another story. But my greatest resource, Bob, are local people who read these stories and they have a connection to the story that I wrote that leads to another story. That's exactly what I wanted to happen. And it's exciting.
It's kind of interesting. I was just on Facebook before I started this interview, and somebody found a pile of old photos, very well preserved, and they look like they're from the late 1890s from the Conneaut area. And nobody wrote anything on the back as to what they were, so he's putting them out there. And well, one was probably from the 20s, and somebody remarked, "Oh my gosh, that's my mother," the fourth one down at the bottom, but they don't know what it's for.
Right. I just recently was given a pile of little tiny photographs in a long strip. Of course, I say me. I give all these to the Historical Society in Jefferson,
right,
so other people can have access. But there were submarines down in the Ashtabula Harbor. And I thought, how could that be? This must be a mistake. But they were all identified. They came with a file. So I looked into that and found out that they were making parts for these down in the harbor.
Oh. Did you?
So I wrote several stories on that.
Initially, you might think that maybe there were subs there because they were afraid of an attack on Lake Erie or something.
Yeah. But yeah, we had the Acme, metal works down there at that time, and they were repairing and fixing some of these, boats. And of course, the harbor used to be much deeper.
Mm-hmm. One thing I want to ask you about is you're involved with this movie about the Ashtabula Bridge disaster. Is that correct? How are you involved in that? Documentary, right?
Yes. I'm sorry. Could you repeat your question?
Well, I was just wondering how you were involved in it, and somewhere I thought I remembered it was going to eventually be shown on a local PBS affiliate.
Yes. It has been purchased by PBS, and they're doing a lot of the funding. We actually have been working on it from the beginning of the research with the documentary filmmaker Lynn Brown for 11 years, just about 11. But before that, at the 125th anniversary celebration of the train disaster, that would be the 1876 Howell Truss Bridge that collapsed into the gorge then. and the lead engine was able to make it across, and there were about 96 people that perished. But initially, it was close to the 125th anniversary. A president of a university who once lived in Ashtabula County wanted to make some sort of celebration, and so we got it together. We had concerts. Philip Bliss and his wife were on the train. We had hymns of his that he wrote. We had it out at Kent State. We started doing more research and using metal detectors down there and locating things, finding stuff that had been preserved in the county by other people over the many, many years. And we wrote the book called Bliss Tragedy in 2003. 5 of us who'd been helping with that research. And a professor at an Ohio university happened to get a hold of that book, had never heard the story, contacted me, and we started working on this documentary.
I would imagine there's a lot of people in Ashtabula County still that don't know that much about it, and this documentary will be an eye-opener, I would think. Yes.
Our next filming will be near the end of July, July 22 through 25, and it will be locally. We're not saying where the location is because this is a major scene. We have our extras all ready, but we'll require some highly technical stuff, and it's called the Gorge of Death scenes. We do not film these scenes in order. We film them according to what the weather is or how it fits in, and then they're pieced together, and of course graphics added and things like that. But this will be the scene down in the gorge after the train has fallen down and people are being rescued and pulled out. So we have all that factual information from the book by Stephen Peet, a pastor who was on site and wrote a book the year after the disaster. And of course, the entire trial, it can be seen online. We have copies of that, of all the coroner's details and so forth. So that's our next filming in July. We'll also have another filming at the Pymatuming Dam about a week after that. And the final filming will be at the Capitol in Columbus at the Ohio Village. There is a hotel there that looks very much like Hotel Ashtabula in downtown Ashtabula, where many of the survivors were brought afterwards for healing and for help. And so then it should be ready for editing. We're 90% done so far, and after those two, we'll be about 100% done with filming and just have the editing done. Should be ready to go to PBS by late fall, early winter.
You say just, but that's a lot of work, the editing.
Right.
That's where the work begins. Barbara Hamilton is our guest. She's an historian. Have you seen the new Mildred Gillers movie?
I have not seen it. I've read the book. I've read many articles about her, but have not seen the movie.
So she was Axis Sally, for those that don't know it. She was over in Germany when the war started, and they kind of kept her there, and she became a propaganda mouthpiece for the Germans, telling the local guys, the Americans, don't be friends with the British, give up, the Germans are superior, that sort of thing. So where do you side with Mildred?
Well, let's see. I thought it was a shame, but I feel that I write about people who've had a positive impact on our county. And so those are the ones that I focus on. Although I have written about her, and I've studied her story, and, she made that choice during the war to do what she did, so it is history.
I watched the movie, and her attorney in the film shouts at her, "You're the most hated woman in the country." And I thought, isn't this nice? And she's from Conneaut.
Right. Yep. Conneaut's history.
We've got maybe 5 minutes left, a little more than that. So could you kind of give us a rundown on some interesting people from Ashtabula County that people may not know about, who had, as you say, you like to do the positive impact on the county, maybe some people don't know about?
Well, Bob, I tried to pick some people from different parts of the county, try not to leave out anyone, and I always try to do that. But I'm just going to briefly give you a little bit about these folks. Jim Dance, which maybe people still living remember from Jefferson. He had a milk out in Jefferson. They had a cow. They milked it, and he delivered milk. But he went on to, in 1950s, he was a great businessman. He helped the Ailing Packard Corporation, helped them merge with Studebaker, and that was his strength. He was honored by Governor Rhodes, and Governor Rhodes came with him here to be honored as Man of the Year at Hickory Grove Golf Course. And that was a big milestone for him, and he worked for Governor Rhodes, and that would have been in 1962. A story that I'm just ready to release in a couple of weeks will be General Colby, who was at, many of have heard of the Battle of Wounded Knee, and that took place in 1890-91, where so many of the Lakota Indians were massacred. General Colby from Cherry Valley was riding through 4 days later, looking at the massacre, and found a baby attached to his mother's back. The mother was dead. The baby was alive. He picked it up, carried it home, and he and his wife adopted that baby, and she grew up. So that's my next story in a couple of weeks. Leonard Worcester Jr. Was married a girl from Lenox, and this is during the raid of the bandit Pancho Villa. He was, his men were massacred on the train. He was on the train before that and survived, and he was arrested and held for ransom while President Roosevelt tried to decide, first Roosevelt, whether they would pay the ransom or not. The girl from Lenox, her father, Moses Beatty, a Lenox pioneer, wrote to the Jefferson Gazette for many, many times begging people to intervene and help. James Martin graduated from Jefferson High School in 1944 and became head of 5 different railroads, including the Illinois Central and Chicago's Belt Railway in 1990. Paul Sipple was from Geneva, and he went with Admiral Byrd on several of his expeditions to the South Pole. So there are so many. Sidney Luce from Kingsville actually helped settle Duluth and develop it. And these are people that most people have never, ever heard of.
No.
It's amazing. I could go on and on, but I'm trying to limit myself.
Well, give us a few more, if you have them.
Oh, my. Let me see.
2 more.
2 more. I just would love to give this one. This has just appeared. Fred Hargensheimer. I always try to have an Ashtabula County connection, but I can't always. And if I can't, I go ahead and do the story if it's so amazing. Fred was shot down by the Japanese over Papua New Guinea, and he survived for a month by himself and 5 months by a tribe that found him. After that, an Australian team coming through discovered him looking for Japanese and rescued him on a submarine. The story just begins there. It's amazing, and this is the rest of the story. He, several years later, staying in touch with a missionary on Papua New Guinea, found out that they never had a school, those natives. He raised the money, $15,000, went back and built the school, stayed in touch with those people for 40 years, and his wife Dorothy and himself went back and taught there for 2 years, built another school. It's there today, called the Airmen's Memorial School, and he built a clinic and helped with the infrastructure. I printed the story and got a phone call the next day after it appeared in the paper. A local Jefferson family said, "That's our uncle."
Huh. Wow. And you didn't know it had any Ashtabula County connection, right?
None at all. And so I'm meeting with her Friday. She has the family scrapbook and said he was an amazing man.
Wow.
94 years old.
And that was just last week that ran.
Yes.
Can you go to the Historical Society and read your articles there? Are they available, or where can you see them?
You can see them online. They're delayed, though, but they are. And, of course, if you have the online Gazette, you can get them there.
Okay.
But if you want to read any of them or any that I've mentioned, Norma Waters, our president, has cut out every single story column that I've written in almost 21 years, has them all categorized in huge 3-ring binders.
So are they in the Historical Society?
The Jefferson Historical
Society. That's right next to the library in Jefferson, across from the Mexican restaurant. We gotta go. It goes fast. Barbara Hamilton, thank you very much for your time. It's been interesting.
Been my pleasure.
Okay. So everybody should be thinking history. It's important.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And sharing it with their children.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm Bob Lebzelter on Perspectives.